Alright, coming in at number 10 we have the glass jar. As we know, the Americans, with the support from the Allies, dropped the horrifying atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The attacks killed over 200,000 people horribly, and the cities were absolutely decimated. Imagine how fragile human flesh is when it comes to heat, and then imagine how hot something would need to be to melt glass. Hot, right? Have a look at this glass jar found in the Hiroshima aftermath. It seems that heat of approximately 1,500 degrees centigrade, 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit, is required to produce this level of deformity. Scientific examination showed that a virtually instantaneous heat wave struck this object and passed as quickly as it had arrived. Basically, the jar resumed its solidified form without leaving stress marks. The flash heat incinerated many people on the spot too, which is absolutely horrible, and this jar just goes to show how hot it really was. Always my thoughts going out to the cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, many years later. Coming into number 9 we have the pilot. This portrait of a World War II pilot in its original 1940s frame was listed on eBay. The listing reads, "This haunted picture holds the energy of an old pilot's ghost." When the haunted picture is set out on display, many people have witnessed a man dressed in uniform appear in hallways and doorways of the house. A deep man's voice can be heard at late hours of the night. I can usually hear military jargon being shouted at fast speed. I don't know why this energy is so attached to this haunted picture, or what this ghost is trying to tell me. Weird. The listing also claimed that only those with the quote-unquote gift would be able to feel the presence. Rightio then. Coming into number 8 we have the World War II wheelchair. This wheelchair is haunted by the ghosts of hundreds of wounded soldiers. Why? Well, the chair was the property of a military hospital during World War II, and it is thought that it contains the spirits of those who sat in it. Sure. Chair owner Neil Packer said that when he sat in the chair, he felt as if his leg had been amputated. Weird. He said that another man's leg went blue after a brief stint in the chair. Another sitter said that she felt like her chest was heavy as if she'd had an infection. The chair was actually taken onto British television too. It featured on This Morning with hosts Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, and Phil decided to sit in it. Honestly, I feel like if I've learned anything across my 4 years of working on Most Amazing Top 10, it's that you should never sit in the haunted chair. Does anyone remember the Busby stoop chair now chained to the ceiling in Yorkshire? Like, seriously, don't sit in the haunted chairs. But unfortunately, Phil couldn't have listened to me because I made this video after he sat in it, and I don't think he watches the channel, but maybe he should. Nonetheless, he sat in the chair on live TV, and this was his reaction.
The chair?
Yeah.
How
do you feel?
I feel like...
No, don't be ridiculous. Don't be annoying.
Just joking, this is actually what he said after making that face.
perfectly normal.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
No twinges in your leg?
I have no twinges. I have absolutely nothing going on here whatsoever.
Coming into number 7, we have the pigeon foot. That's not a pigeon sound. Do pigeons make sounds? I don't know. You'll actually find a lot of severed pigeon feet in war museums across the world. Why? Because birds played a very big part in the war. Pigeons were used to send secret messages, but as you can imagine, that brought about a whole new layer of chaos that came from trying to intercept them and stop enemies finding them. One pigeon that failed in its delivery mission was discovered in 2012 in an English chimney in Surrey. David Martin was cleaning his block's chimney and found that one dead bird had a red capsule on its leg. He opened it up and discovered a secret World War II era message written in code. Eventually the code was cracked and the message was discovered to say, "Hit Jerry's right or reserve battery here. Already know electrical engineers headquarters, troops, panzers, batteries, engineers here." Of course, Jerry, I have to say, was the nickname for the Germans, for those of you watching that didn't know. So, vital intel that was never delivered on account of dead pigeon in chimney. Coming into number 6, we have the Trench Raiding Club. War is savage, and that's pretty evident in the existence of this raiding club. Many old weapons were found after the war, and often these clubs were found. Now they're usually made from wood wrapped in sharp pieces of metal, which to me sounds very medieval. Clubs and flails have been used since times of early warfare. While trench clubs were largely used in World War I, some were still found after World War II, and honestly I can't believe in the 20th century we were still whacking each other with spikes on sticks. Although, thinking about that, I maybe would prefer meeting those than some of the other World War II weapons. Although, actually, maybe the sticks No, the stick. Brutal. It's brutal. It's all brutal. It's all got very morbid too. I'm imagining being hit with a big stick. Ah! Coming into number 5, we have the trumpets that started the war. These scary wartime objects were actually from an ancient period in history. In 1922, King Tutankhamun's tomb was opened. Now this was a period between the First and Second War. A lot of people were very nervous about the whole thing, and perhaps for good reason, as this is where the legends of the Curse of the Pharaoh began. Among the artifacts, silver, wooden and bronze trumpets were found. Now the trumpets were played and recorded in 1939 on British radio, the BBC. A few months after it was broadcasted, World War II broke out and the announcement was delivered to the British public on the same radio station. This has led many to believe that the trumpets are cursed and actually have the power to summon war. This is one of the only instances where I would ever be like, do not play the trumpets. Usually I wholeheartedly encourage trumpet playing. I love trumpets, they're great, but war trumpets are bad. Yes, they are. Coming into number 4, we have the lost bombs, and the found bombs, but mostly the lost bombs are the concern. So a lot of worrying undetonated bombs have been found since World War II. Just last year, 1,000 people were evacuated from their homes in Cologne in Germany when a World War II bomb was discovered near a petrol station in the city, which doesn't sound like a great combination. That wasn't even the worst of it. In 2011, 45,000 people were forced to evacuate their homes when a drought revealed a big unexploded bomb in the Rhine near Koblenz. The scary fact is that thousands of unexploded bombs are still sitting hidden and buried across Europe. Do you want to hear a scary statistic? 70 years later, more than 2,000 tons of unexploded munitions are uncovered on German soil every year. Terrifying. Sadly, coming into number 3, we have the body parts. It wasn't just the Nazis mutating their enemies, a lot of countries were at it. It seems that actually a vast amount of Americans who took part in World War II and were stationed in the Pacific would wear Japanese body parts as trophies, which is disgusting. Luckily, the majority of these have been destroyed, but necklaces made of Japanese teeth were fashioned. Ears were pinned to military belts, and it is even said that Franklin Roosevelt, the President of the United States, was given the gift of a letter opener made out of a Japanese soldier's arm. A bunch of trophy skulls were found after the war. Skulls of dead Japanese people were given to Americans as gifts. Here's a picture of a woman that appeared in a magazine in 1944 that shows her writing to her sweetheart to thank him for the skull. Honestly, I can think of more romantic gifts, but like, whatever. Actually, not whatever. Judging you. Skulls. Gross. Stick to flowers, please. Coming into number 2, I do love a ghost ship. We have the Queen Mary. So the Queen Mary is more than just a haunted object. It's a haunted object filled with hundreds of other haunted objects and floating. When World War II began, British ship the Queen Mary was converted into a transportation ship for Allied troops. She transported 800,000 troops to Europe in her time. Unfortunately though, she was involved in an accident which killed 239 people. The Queen Mary was retired in 1967 after another stint as an ocean liner. She is now a permanently docked hotel in Long Beach, California, but it is said that she is mercilessly haunted by a number of souls. It seems the swimming pool is haunted by the spirit of a young girl. A first-class passenger, dubbed the Woman in White, glides across the floor of the Queen's salon in a long dancing gown. The ship has had to retire the use of room B340 because there have been so many complaints of its haunting. Those who have been on the ship tend to report ghostly goings on, and they have done for decades. Ever since the ship was a working transport ship, people have been spotting ghosts. Scary, but I do love a ghost boat. Coming in at number 10, we have the Diebuck box. A normal object turned supernatural, turned cursed. What a journey. The Diebuck box is said to be a haunted wine cabinet filled with a restless spirit. Interestingly, the wine cabinet had a Jewish prayer carved into the back of it, which is maybe what attracted the ghoul. The spirit in question is allegedly a Holocaust survivor, Haveka, who escaped to Spain. The box was famously sold on eBay in 2003 and has spent the past 16 years bouncing between owners who don't want it, and I can understand why. It seems each owner has fallen on horrifying misfortune and suffered reoccurring nightmares. One owner suffered a stroke shortly after receiving the box as a gift. Apparently the box has now been hidden by Jewish rabbis, thank goodness. The box actually has a connected film with it, The Possession, which came out in 2012. I think it was based on the wine box events. Coming in at number 9, we have the Occult Museum Voodoo Dolls. Voodoo dolls in general are supernatural items. They're little little effigies created in magical kind of practices, and for the person on the receiving end, they're bad juju. Pins are placed in the doll in order to harm the subject, which isn't great, not great at all. So with that in mind, a supernatural object used to invoke a curse, do you want to see the voodoo dolls from the Ed and Lorraine Warren Museum? Guys, you don't know how hard it is to say Ed and Lorraine Warren in one go. It's a tongue twister. Ed and Lorraine Warren. Either way, voodoo dolls. So there is actually a noose on the neck of one of the dolls, which kind of indicates that somebody might have died. The other one has its eyes gouged out, which isn't great either. Visually scary, but also actually scary. It seems that the doll collector came across these dolls and brought them home, only to find that her son's health began deteriorating. It seems that some of the witch's voodoo doll magic had been retained, and it was picked up the boy as a new vessel. The collector contacted the Warrens, who removed the doll, after which the boy made a full recovery. Thank goodness. However, it seems that the story continues. There was a visitor to the museum, and they broke the rules by touching one of the dolls, and later they were involved in a horrifying accident. Who's to blame here? Coming in at number 8, we have the Bassano vase. At first, the Bassano vase is a sight to behold. It's a beautifully carved silver vase from the 15th century. It's an antique. But as it's on this list, you may have realised that actually it's a supernatural antique with a curse. Hurrah! The story goes that the vase was made for an Italian wedding as a gift to the bride, who is to be wed in a traditional ceremony in Napoli. On her wedding night, she was excited, but unfortunately an intruder broke in and stabbed her. She was found bleeding to death, clutching the vase. The legend has it that she promised to return and seek vengeance on the person who stopped her marrying her love. After her death, the vase was passed down through the family, but anyone who came in contact with it mysteriously fell ill, or they were met with serious misfortune. Following that, the vase was wrapped up and packed away, but unfortunately it was unearthed again hundreds of years later in the late 80s, when it also started making headlines for continuing its spate of deadly bad luck. Newspaper reports indicate that the vase was buried again in an undisclosed location, hoping that it would stay out of the way with human contact forever this time. Coming in at number 7, we have the evil eye. The curse of the evil eye. Although actually, this is an interesting twist at this point, because these objects actually protect against curses. The evil eye is a curse cast by a malevolent and malicious glare given to a person when they aren't looking. If an evil eye is cast upon you, you are susceptible to injury or misfortune. It could even mean that you're set upon by animals. To protect yourself from the evil eye, usually people carry a talisman with an eye on it, which in themselves look pretty terrifying, but actually they're there to stare down a curse. The evil eye has been incorporated into a lot of protective objects, most popularly jewellery. Also, there are a lot of evil eye wall hangings and wind chimes. I feel like I'd quite like an evil eye bracelet so it can stare down a few evil eyes that have been looking my way recently, like bah! Reflected curse. Coming in at number 6, we have cursed tarot cards. Tarot cards are used in divination, for forecasting rather than predicting. Usually a person formulates a question and seeks an answer from the cards, a deck of 78 individual cards with different meanings. The most famous cards are Death, the Tower and the Devil, all thought to be bad omens, but of course that depends on your interpretation. Some people are convinced that their tarot decks can become cursed and that everything that's forecast will actually happen badly. There is also a superstition that burning tarot cards will bring a curse upon you. It seems that the only way to be rid of a cursed deck of tarots is to drown them, soak them all face down in water. Honestly, I'm not so sure about that. I think they work by energy, so if you have bad energy, maybe you'll get bad cards. Coming in at number 5, we have Maori masks. Maori is the name of the indigenous people of New Zealand and Polynesia. Masks are made to honour their ancestors, and they're often beautifully carved and slightly intimidating to look at. The masks are thought to contain the souls of warriors who died in battle, so pretty supernatural and ghostly if you ask me. While men are fine to be going around touching a Maori mask, females have a much more uncertain time. Legend has it you should never seek out a Maori mask if you're pregnant or menstruating, because you could invoke an ancient curse. In October 2010, a museum in New Zealand made headlines when it told a pregnant woman to stay away from the sacred artifacts. Speaking of sacred, at number 4 we have Uluru. Is a rock formation an object? Either way, I'm putting it on this list. Uluru or Ayers Rock is both sacred and cursed, if the stories are to be believed. The large sandstone monolith in the Northern Territory of Central Australia is sacred to Aboriginal tribes, the first people of the land. They believe that it is inhabited by the ancestral spirits of the land. The rock started forming 550 million years ago, and it's believed that if a visitor takes a rock from the spot, they will suffer serious misfortune, sometimes even grave misfortune. There have been reports of people returning stones that they've taken from Ayers Rock to try and end their suffering. Shouldn't be taking the rocks in the first place. Coming in at number 3, we have the Terracotta Army. I kind of believe that the Terracotta Army have an air of the supernatural about them. They were, after all, a work of funeral art that were buried with the purpose of protecting an emperor in the afterlife. The thousands of terracotta figures were buried with the first emperor of China in 210 BCE, but they were rediscovered by local farmers thousands of years later in 1974 in Yang Village's rural land. For them though, the discovery was actually a curse. The government didn't pay them well for their findings, and then they took their land and their homes off them in order to build a tourist centre. The government made a lot of money, they didn't. One of the farmers who discovered the soldiers actually killed himself, and the others were met with bad luck, many of whom have died penniless. Coming into number 2, whatever you do, do not touch the demon book. The Book of Soiga is an early 16th century treatise on demonology written in Latin. There are only 2 copies of the book in the world known to us, and one was possessed by the Elizabethan scholar John Dee. Dee spent his life trying to interpret the text, which was filled with spells and rituals. He had a good understanding of what was happening, apart from the final 36 pages, which he just couldn't decipher. He and his trusted friend Edward Kelly summoned the spirit of Uriel to tell them the meaning of the last pages. The legend says that Uriel then possessed Kelly and spoke through him. He claimed that the book came into existence when Adam entered paradise, and that it could only be properly interpreted by the archangel Michael himself. He also said that whoever deciphers the meaning of the last 36 pages will be destined to die 2.5 years later. Why 2.5? We don't know, but I wouldn't want to be reading that book. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the Delhi Purple Sapphire. Also known as the Gem of Sorrow, the Delhi Purple Sapphire was housed in a sacred temple in India, the Temple of Indra in Kanpur. Indra, by the way, is the Hindu god of war and thunderstorms. Amid the British-led turmoil in India, it wasn't uncommon for soldiers to loot sacred temples, stealing their jewels and smuggling them back to Britain. This is exactly what happened with the purple sapphire in question. Colonel W. Ferris took it back to England only to be met with terrible luck. Financial misfortunes befell him, his family got very sick, things started to fall apart. He gave the stone away, and the person who received it committed suicide. The next owner of the sapphire was Edward Heron Allen, who was also met with really bad luck. He bound the stone with silver and attached 2 scarab beetles, and it seemed like the bad luck was contained. However, his dreams were frequently haunted by Hindu yogis until he gave the stone away. The stone then was returned to him, so he threw it in Regent's Canal in London. No prizes for guessing that actually it came back. The story continues over another 100 or so years. More recently, it found its way to a museum, and one night the museum curator was travelling with the stone only to be injured by a terrible storm with his wife.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have space energy. While a team of astronomers was working to map out the universe, which, for a second, imagine that's your job. What a task. Anyway, while they were doing this, they found a very mysterious object that is sending out bursts of energy every 20 minutes. This object is somewhere around 4,000 light years away, but despite this distance, it was sending out energy bursts that were so big that it was one of the largest radio sources in the entire sky. That's no easy feat. These energy bursts were occurring in a cycle where one would happen for 1 minute every 20 minutes before it would disappear for a few hours, and then this whole thing would repeat over again. There is nothing that we know of in this universe right now that would behave like this, so at the moment, while there are of course many hypotheses and theories, this is a mystery waiting to be uncovered. In our number 9 spot today, we have 2022 AE1. Just a few months ago in January, as the year began, scientists were watching an asteroid dubbed 2022 AE1 that became the riskiest one observed in over a decade. The initial observations of this asteroid placed it impacting with Earth on roughly July 4th, 2023, which would mean that there would not be enough time to deflect it, and this asteroid was large enough to do some real damage should it strike an area. Yeah, it was most definitely a cause for concern. There was a week where the moon outshone this asteroid, and so experts weren't able to see it and continued tracking its path, but once the moon was out of this phase, the risk seemed to have diminished. As of now, this asteroid has been taken off of the risk list, but who knows? It seems as though things can change quite quickly and unexpectedly outside the cozy home and protection of our atmosphere. In our number 8 spot today, we have a meteorite. On February 28, 2021, reports came pouring in from across the UK of an unusual streak of light that was seen in the sky. These reports were far behind the UK's Fireball Alliance though, as their cameras had already picked up the signal and they were already in the midst of estimating its landing site. That's right, this streak of light was a meteor, if the title didn't give it away. It's a remnant of our early solar system that has been flying through space at unbelievable speeds until it came down through our atmosphere and ended its long, awesome journey scattered in a bunch of pieces across rural Gloucestershire. Teams were sent out to be responsible for the recovery of the extraterrestrial material, which was found in a family's driveway as well as in a sheep's field nearby. This meteorite is a rare specimen known as primitive carbonaceous chondrite, which is said to contain materials that have been essentially unaltered since the formation of the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. The pieces of this meteorite can give us insights into the building blocks of the planets, and it can potentially give us clues as to how the Earth came to be this wonderful planet that possesses all of the resources necessary to sustain human life. In our number 7 spot today, we have King Tut's meteorite. So I actually learned about this one from Taylor, since he's the little history bee, and it is so interesting. Quite recently, researchers made quite the discovery that actually solved a mystery surrounding a dagger that once belonged to King Tut 3,400 years ago. An analysis of the king's weapon found that it was actually forged out of meteorite just outside of Egypt. That is so cool. This whole artifact and the way it was forged is one of the greatest mysteries in history. It is exceptionally unusual in the fact that it was made out of iron, which is a material that the Egyptians would not begin to smelt for another 500 years. This was just one of the many treasures that was found within his tomb, and one that continues to add to the incredible accomplishments of the ancient Egyptians. In our number 6 spot today, we have Tabby's star. This star, which has also been referenced as the WTF star, is an F-type main sequence star which is located in the constellation Cygnus about 1,470 light years away from Earth. This star is of particular importance because of the fact that it shows unusual light shifts, which includes a 22% dimming in brightness. Basically, from our point of view, something continually blocks the star, and it likely isn't a planet because a Jupiter-sized planet would only block about 1% of the star the size of this one, so what could it possibly be? There are a few theories out there surrounding this anomaly, but none are able to fully explain what is happening here. Some believe that it is some sort of uneven ring of dust orbiting the star, and others believe that the star's luminosity fluctuates depending on the efficiency of the heat being transported to its photosphere. These are just two of the theories surrounding this star, but there are many more out there, and at this point we just don't know. Hopefully though, the James Webb Telescope, which was launched at the end of last year, will be able to get a more clear picture of what may be happening over there on Tabby's star. In our number 5 spot today, we have new material. Of course, when meteorites show up to Earth, people are dying to get their hands on them to study them and see what all they contain. We get some pretty incredible deliveries of things that arrive on meteorites, and analysis has been able to identify about 300 minerals in different space debris that comes down to Earth, and 40 of those are ones that have only been found in meteorites. This is all very cool and interesting, but one of the most fascinating is the Allende meteorite. This is one that exploded over Mexico in 1969, and after analyzing samples from it, in 2012 scientists announced the discovery of a material that had never been seen on Earth, and that frankly no one knew was even possible to make. It was called pangite, and it consists of quite a strange variety of elements, including titanium, zirconium, and scandium. In our number 4 spot today, we have CFBD SIR 2149. Ah yes, the rogue planet with the easiest name to remember. This planet really had the scientific community on edge in 2012. This is because most of the planets we are familiar with orbit a star. I mean, look at the one we're most familiar with. We clearly and thankfully do. That's not the case for this guy though. CFBD SIR 2149 seems to just be drifting across space without any sort of star. This planet is also huge. It is thought to be 7 times more massive than Jupiter, and Jupiter is quite a bit more massive than Earth. This isn't necessarily anything that we need to worry about. I mean, we're at home in our solar system with our star, not wandering around the universe or galaxy, so that's good. I mean, let's just hope it stays that way. Astronomers believe that there are likely billions of rogue planets, and that they might even outweigh the amount of planets that have suns. In our number 3 spot today, we have shooting stars. Okay, so we often look to the night sky in an attempt to see a shooting star, and the chances might be pretty good depending on how light polluted the area is. I mean, either that or you're seeing one of the Starlink satellites, but either way, we know that shooting stars aren't really stars at all, and are instead meteors burning up as they move quickly through Earth's atmosphere. But what if I told you that there really are some shooting stars that are actually stars? Hypervelocity stars were discovered by astronomers in 2005, and it is thought that they occur, or form, when a binary star system, or a star system that has 2 stars, gets destroyed by a black hole. One of the stars in the system will usually fall into the black hole, which just may send the other one flying across through space as fast as millions of miles per hour. It's definitely not the same thing that we think of when we think of shooting stars, but it is quite the galactic event. In our number 2 spot today, we have quasars. If you aren't exactly familiar with them, they are super compact objects that kind of have a star-like appearance, as they are very luminous, and it is thought that these guys are powered by supermassive black holes. So there's obviously quite a few interesting things about these, but one of the most interesting is in relation to one in particular called APM 082795255. This one contains a black hole that is surrounded by a vapor cloud, and within the cloud is 140 trillion times the amount of water on the Earth. It's the largest water reservoir ever discovered. That's insane. Researchers believe that this giant watery cloud formed long ago, just 1.6 billion years after the universe itself. In our number 1 spot today, we have stardust. Just a few years ago, researchers in Australia made a startling discovery. Ancient grains that were discovered inside of a meteorite that had landed inside of the country were studied, and it was revealed that they were actually grains of stardust. This dust was formed somewhere from 5 to 7 billion years ago, and it is now the oldest solid material ever found on Earth. These kinds of pre-solar grains are a very rare find. In fact, they're so rare that they're only found in about 5% of meteorites that have fallen to Earth. This is a fascinating discovery because having something like this really is the next best thing aside from having the actual star itself, and it gives insight into our universe billions and billions of years ago. In our number 10 spot today, we have the Dybbuk box. The box, which was originally just a plain old wine box, is said to have been possessed by a Dybbuk, which, in Jewish mythology, is a malicious demon that takes over the bodies of living people and uses them for evil. The box began to gain attention in 2001 when it was being auctioned off on eBay. The seller explained that he had bought it at an estate sale of a woman who had survived the Holocaust. When he first opened the box, he found 2 1920s pennies, a lock of blonde hair bound with a cord, a lock of black hair bound with a cord, a small statue engraved with the Hebrew word shalom, a small golden wine goblet, 1 dried rosebud, and a single candle holder with 4 octopus-shaped legs. Since he bought the box, he reported that strange things began happening, such as really horrific nightmares for him and anyone who had stayed around or touched the box, and when he gave the box to his mother as a birthday gift, she suffered a stroke the same day. The box ended up in the hands of Zach Bagan, who is a paranormal investigator, and it now resides in his haunted museum. The box also gained even more attention in 2018 when Post Malone touched it, and has apparently been dealing with the repercussions of that ever since. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Iceman. Okay, this one is not an object because it is rather a mummy who was once a real living person, but I still had to include him on this list today because this story is wild. The mummy of Ötzi, who is also referred to as the Iceman, was found in 1991 in the Ötztal Alps in Italy. It is believed that Ötzi lived around 3000 BCE and his body became mummified and preserved because of the glacier that surrounded him post-mortem. While this is an incredibly interesting discovery, the finding of Ötzi may have come in a package with an old curse just waiting to be released. Here's the thing. The people who helped with the discovery of Ötzi are all dying under mysterious circumstances. I mean, we're currently at person number 7 within 1 year, so that's very suspicious. When molecular archaeologist Tom Loy was writing a book about Ötzi, he passed away from a blood-related condition that he was diagnosed with shortly after becoming involved with the Iceman. The German tourist Helmut Simon, who discovered the mummy, fell to his death while hiking in the same spot he saw Ötzi. Dieter Warneck, who was the head of the mountain rescue team that was assigned to find the mummy, died of a heart attack at age 45 just an hour after Simon's funeral. To avoid this becoming an hour-long list, I'll stop here, but that is just half of those who seemingly fell victim to the curse of the Iceman. I don't know, maybe disturbing a man who's been in the same spot for 53 centuries wasn't the best idea anyone has ever had. In our number 8 spot today we have the Hope Diamond. This gorgeous, unusually large diamond is a blue color and worth an insane $250 million. In the off chance you have that kind of money laying around, I still wouldn't recommend purchasing it because it is said to be cursed. The curse dates back to the 17th century and it is said that whoever wears the diamond will have great misfortune and misery. Legend goes that the diamond was stolen from the eye of a sculpted statue of the Hindu goddess Sita, and since then it has been cursing whoever owns or possesses the 115-carat diamond. Stories of the horrible fates of those who have since owned the diamond include people taking their own lives, people being killed intentionally by others, and some accounts even claim that the owner was, quote, torn to pieces, which sounds like one of the worst fates out there. There have since been replicas made of the stone, and I think just to be as safe as possible, I'll probably stay away from those. Just in case. In our number 7 spot today we have Robert the Doll. Annabelle gets a lot of attention for being a haunted doll, but Robert is just as terrifying. Robert the Doll was a childhood birthday gift from a grandfather to his grandson, who was also named Robert, but more often went by Gene. The story claims that while growing up with Robert, Gene would often be heard by his parents in his bedrooms having conversations with himself in 2 entirely different voices. His parents would sometimes be woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of Gene screaming, only to find him completely frightened in bed with overturned furniture around him. Gene would then blame Robert for all of the strange happenings, and at the time, no one really believed him. Gene kept Robert into adulthood, and it became what people would describe as an unhealthy relationship. Apparently, Gene took Robert everywhere with him and spoke as if he was a living entity rather than a doll. Okay, this story is already not great, but it gets worse. Gene lived in a house as an adult that was called the Artist's House. Robert would be left in the upstairs window where children in the area reported seeing the doll disappear and reappear, and they all chose to just stay clear of the house. After Gene passed away in 1974, a woman named Myrtle purchased the house, and apparently Robert as well. Visitors of the house could swear that they could hear footsteps and giggling coming from the attic where Robert was, and some even claimed to see the doll's expression changed if someone spoke poorly of Gene. Myrtle reported Robert moving around the house on his own, and after 20 years she decided she had had enough and donated him to a museum. Robert still lives in the museum where he is safely locked up, but it is said that he still likes to place a little curse on those who take his photo without permission. The walls of the museum near Robert's glass case are riddled with notes from previous visitors and naysayers who are begging Robert for his forgiveness and asking him to remove any curse he has placed on them. In our number 6 spot today we have the Atlantis Ring. The Atlantis Ring was originally made of clay, and it was found in 1860 in the Valley of the Kings in a tomb of an Egyptian high priest. It was then passed on to Howard Carter, who kept it until he passed away in 1939. The ring was believed to be at least 5,000 years old, and it had geometric symbols carved into it that were unlike anything known in Egypt. Here's where the story gets a little weird though. Howard is one of the people who discovered King Tut's tomb, and he would later tell people he was wearing a talisman when the tomb was opened, also known as the Atlantis Ring. He claimed that the ring gave him protection, and that just might be true because he is the only member of the team who didn't die a mysterious death after the opening of the tomb. Even those who visited shortly after the opening of the tomb were subject to this curse, with a total of 18 victims in the end. Howard said that the ring is what protected him against whatever evil forces were at play. So I guess maybe the Atlantis ring is more like an anti-cursed object? I don't know, but what I do know is that it is all quite curious. There are now replicas that are sold, but I'm not sure if any hold the power of the real deal. In our number 5 spot today we have Thomas Busby's chair. Thomas was a man who lived in Thirsk, North Yorkshire, and wasn't known as a very nice man, but he really loved his chair. I guess we all gotta have something. In 1702 he found his father-in-law sitting in it, and it sparked an argument between the two. The father-in-law threatened to take his daughter back, which should have never been a threat considering she's a grown woman, but I guess that's what went on in 1702. Anyway, that's when Busby kicked him out of the house. After this, Busby ended up going over to the father-in-law's house and actually killed him with a hammer and then hid his body in the woods. Of course, the body ended up being found, and this led to Busby getting convicted and sentenced to death. It is said that on his ride to the execution, he asked to stop by his favorite pub for a beer, and this request was fulfilled. Apparently, as he finished his drink, he said, "May sudden death come to anyone who dares sit in my chair." I really don't know what it is with this guy in his chair, but while it currently resides in the Thirsk Museum, it has been recorded that many terrible fates have been met by the people who have sat in the chair. In 1972, it was decided to hang the chair from the ceiling so that no one could ever sit in it again, which is probably for the best. So now, knowing this story, I want you to let me know in the comments, if you had the chance, would you sit in the chair? I wouldn't. In our number 4 spot today we have Annabelle the doll. When I saw the 2014 Annabelle movie, I had no idea it was actually based on a real life doll, but since starting my job here at Most Amazing Top 10, I know all about the real story. This doll now resides inside of the Warren's Occult Museum, where it absolutely belongs, but this story starts off with a college student named Donna who received the doll as a gift from her mother, who had purchased it from an antique store. Donna and her roommate started to notice some pretty creepy things happening and swore that the doll was moving. They said it would appear in different places and positions throughout their apartment before things began to escalate. Donna began to find notes that said help in her apartment, and one night found the doll in a different position and covered in some sort of red substance. The girls then decided to contact a medium who solidified all of their beliefs and told them that the doll had been possessed by the spirit of someone who was killed in their apartment building. For some reason, the girls didn't immediately get rid of the doll, and the story goes that their friend Lou, who was at the girls' apartment, heard strange noises one night and went to investigate, and he was then attacked and killed by Annabelle. The girls finally contacted a priest who told them that the doll was possessed by a demon straight from hell, and then put them in contact with Ed and Lorraine Warren. They tried to do an exorcism on the doll, but it apparently failed, and now it is kept in a glass box in the museum, where it hopefully cannot and will never do any more damage. In our number 3 spot today we have the Uluru Rock. The Uluru Rock is a large sandstone formation that is located in the southern part of the Northern Territory in Australia. It is sometimes known as Ayers Rock, but regardless of what it is called, this area is sacred for the people indigenous to this place. This is part of the reason that those who visit the rock are asked not to take anything from the site. Despite this, people of course still choose to smuggle pieces of the rock out of the area and home with them. Well, other than the bad karma and just in general feeling like a bad person for doing the one thing you're asked not to do, as it turns out, this rock may hold a more sinister secret. Those who have stolen rocks from the Uluru have experienced things like extremely bad luck, severe illness, and even sometimes the death of those they love. The curse these rocks hold is seemingly so bad that it is very common for the company that runs the tours of the formation to receive letters of apology that contain the stolen rocks. Apparently these letters come so often, at least one a day is expected. Maybe this is a weird coincidence, but it just seems to be happening a little too often for that to be the explanation. In our number 2 spot today we have the Bazzano vase. The Bazzano vase was cast from silver in the 15th century and was apparently a wedding present for a bride who lived in a small village in Napoli. On the wedding night, however, the bride was found dying on the floor with her hands wrapped around the vase. With her last breath, she vowed to have her revenge, and at this point it became unclear whether the vase was already cursed or perhaps if this may be what what caused the curse in the first place. As time went on, the vase was handed from person to person within her family, and with each new owner came a mysterious death. Because of this, the family decided to hide the vase away in some sort of secret location, and this worked for a while, until the vase was unearthed once more in 1988. The vase also contained a piece of paper from the family that warned, "Beware, this vase brings death." Well, of course, whoever found the vase did not listen, and instead, they sold it once again. The first buyer, who is said to have been a pharmacist, owned the vase for 3 months before passing away under mysterious circumstances. Then there was the 37-year-old surgeon who died after having the vase for 2 months. After this was the archaeologist who only made it 3 months with this vase in his possession, and at this point you get where this is going. We don't know exactly where the vase ended up, but I'm hoping it's somewhere deep underground. Or maybe in space. Or maybe in the Mariana Trench. Just anywhere far away from all of us. In our number 1 spot today we have the Goddess of Death. This statue is sometimes also known as the Woman from Lem. This artifact, made out of limestone, was created sometime around 3500 BC, and it was found in Cyprus in 1878. Over the years it has belonged to many different families who have all been ruined and dismantled by death. After the first 6 years of ownership, all 7 members of the first family died. It then moved on to a second owner, and after 4 years, death began to come to him and his family. There was then a long period where it was unclaimed, but once the third family got a hold of it, several members of that family began to die as well. The third family ended up turning it over to the Royal Scottish Museum, where it thankfully still resides. However, the museum curator who handled the item was mysteriously killed a few days after. It is clear whatever curse this statue holds, it is strong and frightening.